Good afternoon, everyone, and we're happy to welcome everyone at our virtual chat. I know we haven't had them for a while, but we're so happy to restart them with Michelle today. My name is Gulshan. I'm American Spaces Program Specialist with the U.S. Embassy, and today I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Michelle Schultze. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, everyone.
Michelle is a virtual intern in the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs section of the U.S. Embassy. She's from the United States, but I'll let her introduce herself in more detail. And Michelle will be talking about text slang in English. And I want to remind everyone that we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box right below the video, and Michelle will answer them after her presentation. All right, thanks so much. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Um, for context, I'm a 20-year-old university student from the United States. I'm from South Carolina. I study economics and Russian at Duke University, and I'm currently studying abroad in London. So yes, feel super blessed and happy to be here. And thank you so much for your attention. I hope that I can explain some interesting things today. A lot of this is from my own observations from speaking with my peers. Um, so I feel like text slang in English is a pretty important topic when you're learning English for any language learner. It's important to know how to speak casually and what other people are saying when they speak casually to you. Um, it's just another mode of speaking and so on. Um, so let's just get into it. And also, just as a caveat for this, um, as I'm talking about text slang in English, a lot of this is going to be American, it's going to be Generation Z, it's going to be specifically like what I see as a 20-year-old. Um, and so I think that that's not necessarily going to be representative of everybody, but it might be. I tried my best to make this as representative as possible of the most common terms I see, especially on social media as well. You might know a few of these as well. You might know all of them, but hopefully that you can learn something or other through this presentation. So I just wanted to make a quick slide also to explain why I think it's important to know text slang in English. Text slang can make your text feel more natural and casual, mimicking real speech. That's the whole point of texting, is to be able to make your texts to make somebody else feel more comfortable with you, make them feel more familiar. So I feel like since I'm currently abroad in a foreign country, um, I have to keep up with my friends primarily through texting, and so I find that it's important to know the slang and to speak um, naturally and comfortably with them through text, because that's going to be the way that I keep up with them during this time. Um, and so you might have English speaking friends as well. And so one of the best ways to practice is by speaking frequently with them. And so, um, and most frequently, I do see that as I'm learning Russian as well, I need to be texting a lot, um, just because that's the most accessible way. And so I think that um, that that's one way that slang becomes very important to know. Um, I think that also it helps to connect with English speakers your age. If you're, um, you know, if you're a younger speaker of English, I feel like this is, it's common to use these terms, especially in text and social media, and some things are popular in speech as well, and I'll try to point those out throughout the presentation. Um, I think that it's important not to overuse these terms, because everyone has a different set of terms that they consider to be common in certain contexts. And so it's important to, as you're talking to somebody, kind of match the level of familiarity that they're using um, in that interaction. I think that's obviously important in every language, but it is really important with some of these terms, since they might seem too informal, they might seem too casual in certain contexts. And I'll try to point out when generally people would be okay with using these. Um, And yeah, I think that that covers everything in terms of context. Here are some different ways to practice. Obviously, friends. Um, to keep up with friends, it might be you can always use these terms. You can ask them like, "Hey, when would I use this term in conversation?" Especially since like there are always new terms popping up. Like I feel like whenever I go on social media, I'm always learning new words. And so even as a native English speaker. And so I think that that's, it's an interesting topic of conversation since a lot of people do participate in slang. And so, it's something that you can connect on, talk about pretty early on, as you're making friends and keeping up with friends. Um, Another thing is that there are plenty of language learning platforms available. One that I've used before is HelloTalk, where you can have like a text or like voice chat, or it's like a language exchange app. And they also you can kind of correct each other's mistakes within text as well, and I feel like that's a pretty useful thing. Simply scrolling through social media, you can learn plenty, and this isn't as important for text slang, but if you watch TV, especially reality TV, I feel like sometimes it's not like fully representative because it's an edited version of reality, but you can learn some different terms that are more common in everyday speech. And I'm always a big fan of a trashy reality TV show, and so I'll touch on that later as well. So Urban Dictionary, I feel like, is the tried and true great resource for looking up slang. So keep in mind that it has some weird terms that nobody uses, like definitions that were put in there 15 years ago. Um, but it's still a great resource. I used it a couple times in this presentation and to explain things that I wasn't really sure how to explain. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's a good first place to look. So I wanted to do one slide just on laughing because I feel like that is a really important topic whenever like how to distill down laughing, which is such like an immediate informal um, action that you can't really put down into words. Like how do you distill that down into a text message and make it feel natural? And so here are a couple different um, ways that this is expressed through text that I see frequently. Um, so, uh, so there's the LOL, there's LMAO, there's haha. There's also like if you key spam, if you hit H and A over and over again, it doesn't matter if it ends up in a different order than just H and A alternated. Um, if you're just doing that, that looks good. Something that's more common recently is the idea of dead or the skull emoji especially. It's like the idea that you've laughed so hard that you're dead. And I feel like um, it what's used a lot in English at least is the idea of hyperbole in some of these terms. So if something is maybe not as funny, but you respond with like, a more over the top hyperbolic response, um, then it becomes, even funnier. It's like I feel like that's a very Generation Z thing. Um, and I think that it's really important. It shows like, a little bit more spontaneity and um, interest in your text as well. I Another thing is so I mentioned key spamming. It's just this idea of you like um, you know, going to town on your keyboard, you're typing lots of words in a random order or lots of letters in a random order. That's what you see at the bottom here with just like the random string of letters. I feel like that's a really common thing that I've seen as well, but that's only certain people do it, other people never do it. So that's something that's important as well. And yeah, I think that capitalization matters because it shows intensity, of course. I feel like punctuation is almost never used with this. Like, you never see somebody say, haha, and then like an exclamation point. I feel like to a Gen Z listener, they might, or like if you're texting with somebody who's Gen Z, they might see that and they might be like, oh, that's a little bit antiquated. But like, um, I feel like these are the most common terms that I see. There's a couple other things here that I wanted to go over. This is a very popular meme from about maybe 15 years ago. Um, and so here we see somebody using the cry laugh emoji um, in a very sad context. It's like um, this person is saying, "My mom leaving us from this world soon," and then like three cry laughing emojis, which is it's a little bit incongruent, a little bit of a mismatch to the situation since the cry laugh emoji is used only for laughs. I'm sure it's used in other languages as well, but I wanted to make sure I went over this since it's used commonly in English text. Um, and then also LOL. Um, in this case, on the right side, we see a text interaction in which the mother thinks that LOL means lots of love, but actually it is used as laughing out loud, and so humor. I also wanted to point out the crying emoji. I feel like that's used quite a lot recently, um, and so I think um, if something is funny but also a little bit sad, like, "Oh man, I left my keys in the room. I'm locked out." Cry emoji. It creates a little bit of levity to the situation because it's this idea of being over the top with, showing an over the top expression, which creates a little bit of, lightheartedness to the interaction. Here's another example. So here is my friend sending a photo. I've hidden it for privacy's sake. Um, and then two of my other friends respond and they say, "Ha ha ha," like it's and dead, as in like really hyperbolic reaction. It wasn't even a very funny photo, it was just my friend making a funny face, but what creates more humor is the, response being so over the top. Um, so um, here's another slide here with an interaction with my roommate. I'm away from her, sadly, during the semester. She's the person I've been rooming with for 2 years, and so I I was asking her what she's gonna do during fall break. So, um, I'm gonna draw your attention down to the haha first because I wanted to there are other things on this slide I'll cover later, but here, the haha is used as a tone indicator. Now, what do I mean by that? I feel like something that is so common in our generation is using haha, LOL, and LMAO as tone indicators to show that what you are saying is lighthearted and not serious. And, um, it's a bit of a joke in that I've heard recently, which is like, I can't send a text without saying LOL at the end or, um, that sort of thing. And, like, I feel like I've had a problem with that in the past. Um, it's just like because text messaging, sometimes we rely on that um, to forge connections, to keep up with people. It's important to make sure that your texts don't feel too serious, too, um, austere, too, intimidating. It kind of breaks down a little bit of that perception, by creating a sense of levity, even if you're not laughing, um, which is something that I feel like is a bit unique to our generation. I think it's potentially because a lot of us grew up interacting with people primarily online, and through text, um, or like certain people primarily through text and online. And so how do you quickly connect with somebody and show that you're not being overly serious in your texts? Sometimes you can add something like that. This is very context dependent. Many people don't do this at all. Many people do it in every single text they send. So really, you just have to read the room. You have to see what the other person is sending. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's one of the most important things when it comes to laughing and text slang in English, is this idea of it being added to the end of a text as a tone indicator. Um, so moving on to some of the other grammatical items on the slide. Um, You don't need to be perfect with grammar, in text. That's not a secret. That's the case in every single language. But, you can as you can see here, I'm sending a text to my former roommate, and I'm saying, "Do you know what you're doing this fall break?" formally, you would say, "Do you know what you will be doing during fall break?" or something like that. Um, and so in this way, you can kind of it's something that takes a lot of practice, but you'll find that you don't have to be so particular with what you say. A lot of words are dropped, a lot of capitalization is dropped. Um, Punctuation it can go any direction, and it's something that you're only going to see with practice. Um, and here's another thing: the idea of or the word gonna as a contraction of going to. I just used it. Um, and this is a very American thing as far as I'm aware. Um, it's it's frequently used. It's just an easier way. It's a bit of a mouthful saying going to, and so I find that I say gonna quite a lot, and I don't even realize it. Um, and people use it in texts too. So you can see um, in the text that my roommate sends back, she says, "I'm gonna just be chilling," and so on. The other term that's used here is J chilling. This is a very recent term. Chilling means relaxing. That's a common slang term in American English and other English as well. Um, but the idea of J chilling with J, it means just. That is something that's a little bit more recent. Um, and that kind of I think it comes from social media. I'm not entirely sure of the origin. Um, but it just means that she's gonna be chilling, relaxing, reading for fun during break. I'm sorry that you can't see the circles. I had transitions on this slide, but for some reason they're not playing. So yeah, I hopefully this is clear at this point. I'll be taking questions at the end, and I'm happy to explain anything that's not clear at this point. Um, so yeah, here's another example. So my friend was actually coming to meet us in London. Um, which was very exciting, a great weekend. But here her flight got delayed and she had a very short layover. And so she was texting us. Um, so she's about to land and she has a very short layover. Um, so here I wanted to show that capitalization can be stylistic. In this case, she uses lowercase I. Some people also turn off auto capitalization at the beginning of some sentences, at the beginning of like text messages in general, and so all of their texts are in lowercase, completely stylistic. It's most common to leave that on though, um, and it's most common um, to also capitalize the I. But this is also you see this every now and then as well. Um, so then BC is often replaced with because is often replaced with BC. I see that all the time. Sometimes I catch myself writing an email and trying to send it that way. It's just such a common contraction acronym. So that's something that you can definitely use, but don't send it in emails. And also another example of the tone indicator, LOL. Um, so in this case, she's saying the flight starts boarding at 5:24. She was sending this at like 5:10. Um, and so she sends LOL. It's kind of this idea of, it's this hyperbolic context mismatch idea that kind of creates a little bit of humor. Um, and yeah, so also moving on to the okay, I feel like any of these versions of okay that I listed, I see them frequently all the time. Um, but then less common is the capitalized okay. Um, I think that I just don't see that as often. I think that was more popular in the past, but in younger generations, it's these other terms. Um, and yeah, and then another item is the punctuation here. I never see people end their texts with periods, and I don't know if that's the case in other languages. Um, But I had a conversation with my one friend who actually does, end his texts with periods, and it's extremely rare, and we're like and then I tell him, like, "Why do you do this?" I think it's because it feels very formal. It feels very like, a very complete thought and more serious, if you end your text with a period, it feels a little bit intimidating, if you don't know the person as well. Um, and so in that way, I feel like almost nobody ends their texts with periods. Of course, they're, like, throughout the middle. If you have, like, a long text that you're sending, like, this is mostly an informal speech, but I almost never see that. Um, but, like, you see exclamation points, you see double exclamation points, question mark, especially, like, question mark and exclamation point together, see that frequently as well. Um, so yeah, I hope that was clear. I didn't realize how long this slide had gotten. I just kept adding words. These are some of the most important acronyms that I think, um, anyone texting in English should know. So I'll just go briefly through all of them, and, explain what they mean. So, NGL, not gonna lie, with gonna as, like, one of the words in there. Um, so, I'm not gonna lie, blah, 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 blah. People add this all the time into their text messages. Um, IDK or IDEK, I don't know or I don't even know. This is frequent as well. IDC is um, another variation on this. Whenever you say "I don't care," a lot of people say IDC if it's more, of a throwaway comment. Um, and then more infrequently, I don't see this as often. I have maybe 1 or 2 friends who use this. IDT, I don't think. So if you say that one, like, some people might be like, "What?" But you might see that one in the wild as you're speaking to people, every now and then. LMK, I say this all the time. Um, Let me know if anything changes. Let me know if, if he writes back to you. Um, and OMG and so on. Um, STG, I swear to God. Like, all of these are very frequent as well. Everyone's heard of OMG, but, yeah, it's just a very common interjection. Also, I feel like OMG is used in so frequently now that it's like never spelled out, or it's just less frequently spelled out, and it's also used in contexts when you wouldn't expect it. And so it's one of those where it's important to read the room because some people are religious and they refuse to use that, and some people use it frequently all the time. So um, I feel like that's one of the most common interjections, OMG, and people use it at the beginning of a response often. So I see that one quite a lot. RN right now, used all the time. FR for real, also used all the time, especially recently. I think that that's slightly more recent than other terms. TY, thank you. TYSM is another variation. So TYSM, thank you so much. Um, and NVM, never mind. It's about just changing the subject. Um, and NBD, no big deal, not a problem. NP, not a problem. Very common, extremely common terms. BTW, by the way. Um, V and VV also used as abbreviations for very. U as an abbreviation for you. Though, without spelling out the rest of though, is used quite often. My B, my bad, etc. Um, GF and BF as abbreviations for girlfriend and boyfriend are very common. I feel like I only see people spell out girlfriend in, like, more in-depth conversations. If they're saying, like, "I'm hanging out with my GF," that's something that you see commonly. Um, and GL, good luck. Um, a lot of the origins of slang come from gaming, like video games, also sports. I feel like those are 2 big origins of slang nowadays. And so GLHF is definitely one that, um, originates from video game slang because, like, growing up, I would play on these, multiplayer Minecraft servers, and you have like 2 seconds to send something in the chat. So you would say GLHF, good luck and have fun. Um, I feel like that's something that's commonly used now, but I think that was born primarily on video games, and especially for Gen Z, you know, in these chats, you would just send that, very informally, and so I think it's something that just stuck with us. Um, so yeah, here's another, text example. Um, this one is primarily, I think, about, punctuation and capitalization. So, I'm sorry that you can't see it without the red circles, but hopefully it's still clear. So here I this is an example of a text message that I sent, to my roommate saying, "Hey, when you get a chance, can you let me in? I forgot my key inside." So this is an example of how adhering strictly to punctuation rules is not as important in text. Um, and you can see hiding behind the circles, I have 2 crying emojis. Um, I wasn't actually crying, but, I was, frustrated at myself, and so that's why I used those. Um, and I used the double question mark, and then also I used a comma between the 2 sentences. That's something that is just very informal. I felt like doing that. There was never any, intention when I put the comma down. It just shows you how punctuation some of the rules are thrown out the window in text messages. And then here's another text from my roommate, completely different interaction when I was just checking up with her, and she said, "All been good. I have my first midterm today." But she skips the I. She doesn't have I. She just says have, and then it's also lowercase. It just shows you how none of these rules matter, or at least these specific ones don't matter. As long as the person understands what you mean, that's all that matters in text message. And so, I think um, a lot of texts have been just paring down, um, and making the language as easy as possible to, um, communicate between people, um, without, spending too long typing out certain things. That's, like, the whole idea behind text messages. Um, so then here we go. There's no comma after addressing somebody. So in the orange box hidden behind the, red circle on the final text interaction, um, we see, that's somebody's name, so let's say Katie. "Katie, are you still here?" There's no comma after Katie, um, and that's just something that's common as well. It just is an extra thing that you don't have to tap, um, and then, also apostrophes are less required. We see, this Katie person responds, and they say "I'm" without the apostrophe, without the capitalization, etcetera. Um, it's just an expression of lazy, quick, casual writing. Um, and the final thing I wanted to point out is fam. It's a very, informal way to say family. I feel like um, people use it very offhandedly and even, like, ironically, um, nowadays, so that's something that you can integrate into your speech. Now, this is one of the most important terms, and I realize I'm taking a little while to go through all of these, but I hope this has been helpful. Um, but this is possibly the most important term that I can talk about today, because it's used extremely frequently, in, text and speech nowadays, especially American text and speech. Um, so "slay." Um, it's it may be outdated soon because it's been used so often, especially over the past year. It originally comes from drag culture in the US. So it was these small queer communities, especially in the 80s, a little bit in the 70s, a little bit in the 90s, and so on. Um, these queer, gay communities, primarily composed of people of color, that's where these terms were born. So you have slay, you have tea, um, you have camp. I'm gonna talk about those 2 as well. A lot of the mainstream slang nowadays comes from those communities decades ago, um, which is something that it's extremely mainstream nowadays, and so people don't really think about, this origin, but they are aware of it as they say these words. Um, and it really shows I feel like the rise of these words was concurrent. It was at the same time as um, gay acceptance becoming more mainstream in America, at least. Um, and so that's my theory for these words. So slay, it is the most common word nowadays that shows you how much has changed in terms of cultural perception of these terms um, over time, and also this community. But so people use it so frequently, and some people use it ironically as a joke because it was generally associated with um, queer members of the community, but also women using it. And so now I feel like men started to use it ironically. Huge generalization, but that's just kind of what I've seen with a lot of men. Some people use it just regularly. And so now it's pretty universal among younger people. A lot of people use it, everybody knows about it, and so on. So the closest translation, it's awesome, or that's great, or you're doing amazing, it comes from the idea of you're slaying, with the idea of slaying as a synonym for killing it or doing a great job. Very playful, very informal tone, very familiar. Um, and some variations or some usages that you can use this. It can be a noun or it's used as an adjective. So you can say that's a sleigh or that is so sleigh and so on. It's very silly to have to explain all of this. Um, but I hope that this helps to give some understanding. Here are some examples from recent interactions I've had with friends. Um, so um, here's my roommate texting me, "If you wouldn't mind starting on the pasta in, like, 15, that would be so slay." Um, "That would be so cool if you started on the pasta." You know, that's it's a very Gen Z way to phrase this. And, so then here's another one of my friends, sending their time on the Mini, the mini crossword from the New York Times, um, and they took longer than a minute, which is according to her, really long. For me, it's not that long. And she says, "Not a sleigh today." Um, so and then here we have a final interaction to the right. Um, Sleigh, okay, I'm gonna have name Laura. Slay, okay, I'm gonna have Laura start drafting an email to nationals, as in, like, the national organization that we work with for this club. Um, and then I respond with slay. So we can see the double slay usage here. I think it's just because this is the laziest, most informal texting style. Um, we probably didn't even realize at the time that we were both using it. Um, so it's like slay used as like an offhanded great. That just shows you how informal all of this is. Um, Gonna go a little bit more quickly through this. So some recent slang on social media. Bruh is extremely common. Um, and it's this deadpan exclamation. Started maybe like 10 to 15 years ago. Urban Dictionary says a sign of exasperation, a word you say when somebody says something stupid. It's derived from bro and dude, like bro as in the abbreviation for brother, just like a very casual way to refer to a guy. Um, and then I'm including this, but I wasn't sure to. I ran it by a couple friends and they were like, sure. But you can see the Easter Island statue emoji. Um, it just it's like it kind of has a deadpan expression on its face. And so some people send that in a very funny off the cuff way of saying bruh. It's similar to that idea. Very niche, young, ironic, etc. You don't see that frequently, but it happens. So then "let's go" is extremely common. I think it came from sports. Um, so it's this idea of amazing, that's great, like, we did great. Like, if you win a game, you, like, run around and you say, "Let's go." That's something that's extremely common nowadays. I feel like that's, like, just the most common way to express your happiness with that. Um, And then like the fire and the 100 emoji, you see that a lot. Associated with men, I think it's because of the origin, and because it's used so frequently in sports, but women use it all the time as well. Um, so this is an interaction I had, I believe this was with my boyfriend, and I sent him a screenshot of somebody canceling on me for coffee, and I was so sad. I hid it with this other photo for privacy's sake, and, um, and I just send it with a frowny face. I'm like, and then he responds with "bruh." So sad. So it's this sigh of exasperation, um, yeah, oh, like, "Oh, that's so sad," like, "That sucks." Bruh. You can say bruh to anything, that's another joke that I've seen before. Um, like, a lot of guys say bruh to everything just to show lack of creativity, I guess, but, yeah, so that's a very, very common, thing nowadays, especially in certain groups. Um, tea has the same origin as slay. It means drama is also something that's used quite a lot, just like expressing that something is interesting, unique, dramatic. Um, camp also comes from queer culture. Um, so I had to use an Urban Dictionary explanation for this. An aesthetic style in which something appeals because of its irony. Basically, it's so bad that it's good, and I think that that's accurate for how it's used. So bad that it's good. And having deliberately artificial, vulgar, banal, or affectedly humorous qualities or style. That's a very wordy way of saying it just looks tacky. It looks, um, uh, you know, tacky. I think tacky is a good word to describe that. But I'll show some examples in a moment, and hopefully that can illustrate some items here. Zany is used quite a lot. It means crazy. Um, like you can say, "Oh, that's crazy," or like, "Oh, that's zany," um, and so on. Um, and I wanted to slide this in. It doesn't really have to do with any of the other words here, but aesthetic, as in like that's so aesthetic. It's so aesthetically pleasing. Um, it means it looks good or pleasant. I feel like I see that quite a lot. Um, and and so on. Um, so here, um, to cover the top left first, I was talking with one of my friends, and she said, this person was talking about a guy that somebody is talking to, and I was like, "Oh, drama. That's like, that's gossip." And I said, "Ooh, tea." Um, as in like that's drama. That's interesting, and so on. So that's one way that you can use tea. You can also use it if it's like any interesting thing. For instance, I watched this, crummy, trashy reality TV show called Big Brother, with my boyfriend. It's one of these reality TV shows, it's a competition, um, and the editing is known for being extremely camp. So bad, it's good. Um, and at least, like, within internet communities, it's known for being that. Or, like, it's known for being very overly edited, like, it's a little, over edited, trying too hard a little bit. Um, and so I watch it with my boyfriend at least partially because it's so bad, it's good. And in that way, it fits the term camp. And also in the top right, you can see I send a video about Big Brother and I say tea because I'm like, this is interesting. This is unique. It has some sort of interesting dramatic commentary. Um, and so that's why I said tea there. Um, and I think that covers this slide, but as you can see, the middle bottom text there, I'm starting Big Brother 25, like as in Big Brother season 25, and I forgot how camp these intros are, LOL. Another tone indicator there with the LOL. And then I forgot how camp these intros were. They're just very silly, very so bad it's good. Some more recent slang on social media. We have lit, used quite a lot, a term used to describe something that's so cool and exciting. I think litty is like the ironic sibling of lit, because it's just kind of going over the top on like, "Oh, I'm using this slang term that I wouldn't use otherwise," and that makes it more funny. I think that's why people use that. Um, and then crazy lit movie is another term that's used quite a lot. So pretty much used only ironically, especially nowadays. But it's an idea that an event would go so well that it would be like a movie. So crazy and lit just like adds hyperbolic, humorous emphasis to the positive qualities of the event. So I see a text to the right um, with my boyfriend. Um, we were excited about studying abroad in London and how cheap the plane tickets would be to go visit places. And so I sent a text saying like I ran the numbers. Round trip flight would be pretty cheap. And then he says, "Bruh, so good." Um, and then we can definitely get cheaper than that. And then he says this could actually end up being a crazy lit movie. I think that explains itself, you know. Um, the idea that it's gonna go so well, it's gonna be like a movie. So whack, wrong, or silly. Um, Here I'm texting somebody and I'm saying I can't see the notes, and they say, "Huh, that's wacky. Let me fix that." Um, just a frequent term to show it's wrong, silly, not cool. Um, and then like my sleep schedule has been a little wacky, has been whack. Um, and then training was very whack and intense is something I sent because my job had a very intense training that was you know, not cool, wrong, silly, etc. Um, so then also we see here, um, bae is used as a term of endearment for babe um, or a girlfriend or boyfriend. Created around 10 years ago. It's only used ironically now. So you might see that around. And then facts, it's like agreeing with somebody. And um, you can also say true in the same context. So, okay, we're almost done, guys, I promise. So, sidebar nowadays, all of these terms are more frequently used ironically for the sake of humor or a joke, hyperbole. I've said this before, but I have an example here that really shows it. And I think this really reveals a kind of generational thing with Gen Z, um, this idea of cynicism. So my friend was texting us at around like 3 a.m., writhing around in pain trying to sleep because she had an ear infection. Um, and so here's my friend. Let's call the friend with the ear infection Katie, and the friend in orange, Jeremy. So Jeremy sends this photo of a book called As I Lay Dying, and this is Katie right now, is what he says, with the RN. And then Katie responds saying, "For real," um, as she is like currently in so much pain. Um, and so the next day, she ends up going to the hospital and she gets the medicine she needs. Um, and she says, she updates all of us and she says, "Not a brain hemorrhage though, so progress." Hemorrhage being when you're like losing a lot of blood. Um, and so not a brain hemorrhage, she's not like bleeding to death in her brain. So that's progress. And like progress as a shortened word for term for that's progress. That's how she used that. And then so I respond with dub as like a kind of, you know, that's a win, but like also she is still in a lot of pain. So it's like a kind of cynical way of being um, like you can say, well, I mean, let's back up a second. Dub means it's a shortened form of W, which is short for win. And I think I glanced briefly at a comment that said L, like explain what L or W means. So L is short for loss, W is short for win. So like this comes from video game slang, I'm pretty sure, and maybe also sports slang. And so it's this idea of like I said, "Oh, that's a win right there." You know, it's a win that you're not bleeding to death from your head. And then somebody else responds in the chat saying slay. Another hyperbolic thing. It is a slay that you're not bleeding to death. So I think that dub is also might be associated with American sports specifically, but I might be wrong on that. A little bit more niche and informal. I feel like you see that mostly on social media and in very casual interactions. I don't see it anywhere else. Um, so moving on, this is taking a little longer than I thought, but I hope that this is, fulfilling what it needs to do. Some other recent slang on social media: goes dummy, goes crazy, or slaps. Essentially just means this thing is really good. With dummy could also be used alone as a synonym for very. So I could say rent is dummy expensive in London, which is true. Um, and it's just a very Gen Z way of saying rent is very expensive in London. Here is my boyfriend texting me saying we had Laotian food and it slapped. It was really good. Um, so that's a text from him saying that. And then I was texting him later saying, for political science classes, it's pretty hardcore, but it could go dummy, which means that it could be really good. Um, but it's very hardcore. It's very challenging. It's very difficult. That's what hardcore means. Um, so that's the usage of that sort of term. And then I'll go as quickly as possible through this. Um, so the idea of gas or gasoline as a word that refers to food. Um, so it's this idea of this food is so good that it gives me a crazy amount of fuel and energy. Um, but it's used ironically, as you can see in the bottom right corner. Barbie ice cream is actually gas, meaning that like this ice cream is so good. It just means that this is so good. Um, and Barbie ice cream being like a promotional product for the Barbie movie. And then the idea of bars, it comes from the idea of freestyle rapping. That's another origin for quite a lot of slang. Um, if you're rapping well, somebody might say bars to validate what you're saying is high quality. It's frequently used to mean that's great in like a general expression of positive approval. So, yeah, so I got a text saying, "But yeah, I've been working on that stuff because my final assignment is very chill." And I was like, "That's great, bars." And so I sent bars right there. Um, and then finally, the term cooking, used frequently. Um, so I don't know how much of the Barbenheimer um, phenomenon was witnessed in Uzbekistan, but for anybody who doesn't know, um, Barbenheimer was um, so the movie Barbie and the movie Oppenheimer were released on the same weekend, and so it became a thing to watch them both on the same day or in quick succession of each other, like right after each other, because they were just so different, but they were both going to be great movies. Um, so, and it was just kind of funny the juxtaposition between the two. So I was doing this with my friends. A lot of us were in DC, Washington, DC, over the summer. And so we were like, okay, we're going to do this together. We're going to watch um, Oppenheimer first and then Barbie second. And then, so as we're planning this, my friend sends, as you can see in the top right, transition from Oppenheimer to Barbie mode like a magical girl transformation sequence. And then this person sends that as a screenshot and says, wait, my friend is cooking with a suggestion of a mid-theater wardrobe change. So it's the idea of, this is a good idea. They're cooking. They're like, they're working. They're creating a good idea, or they have created a good idea. Um, so that's the usage of cooking. I feel like that's used very frequently nowadays. Like, oh, you're cooking with that. Like, you say like, oh, what if we do this instead of this? Like, oh, you're cooking, or like, oh, am I cooking with this idea? That's used frequently. And this is the final slide. I just wanted to have like a slide for specific to America slang. We have gonna, we have y'all and you guys, used all the time. There are many times in this presentation when caught myself about to say y'all. It's seen as less formal, but I use it all the time since I'm from the southeast of America, where it's used all the time. It's also used all the time in the rest of America. I feel like it's one of those terms that has spread. And y'all just means a contraction of you all. And then you guys is kind of like another way of saying plural you. So like you talk to a group of people and you say you guys. Sometimes I talk to my parents and I say you guys because there really isn't another substitute other than just saying you, but then it's kind of unclear. Are you talking to one of them or both of them? So I think that that's something that is pretty American because there are other variations in other areas of the world for how to do the plural you. Um, what's up, sup, how's it going? Um, very informal ways to say, how are you doing? I feel like when I walk into a store, I typically go, how are you doing? Just to kind of be friendly and ask how they're doing today. That's like the most common way to go about doing that. But if you're familiar with somebody, you can say, how's it going? Sup? What's up? Um, and I feel like you're able to do that more quickly in America. You're able to go with the more familiar option. You can go sup, you can go what's up, and so on. Poppin is very frequent, or it's like I see that frequently, especially over the past like 5 years, I would say. Um, this place is popping. It's um, like it's a lot is happening at this place. It's a good event. Like if you're texting from a party and you're going, this party is popping, like you should come because this party is good right now. There's good energy here. Um, and another term I didn't put down is going off. So this party is going off. It would be the same idea of like this party is really good right now. Um, the energy is really good. The vibes are very good, and so on. Flex equals a brag, like that's a flex. Flexing on them, like you're doing very well. You're just so good that you're flexing on them. You're bragging a little bit. Sus comes from um, Among Us, the video game. It's frequently used for quite a while. It just means suspicious, but it's used outside of that context nowadays very frequently. Like, oh, that's very sus, that's very suspicious of you. Um, or like, even if you just say something a little bit weird, you could say, like, in certain contexts, people say, oh, that's sus. No cap, as in, like, I am not lying. Um, Apparently, Urban Dictionary says that comes from the idea of gold teeth, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, no cap on these teeth, or like no veneer. They're just natural. Like no cap. I'm not lying. Um, so that's used frequently. It's just an expression of, I'm telling the truth here, or like no caveats on it. Like this is just true. This is accurate. Um, and then finally, the idea of fire or straight fire means top notch. It means high quality. And this is another one with origin from rap and music slang. It just means like, you know, especially used with music, you can say, this is like you listen to a little bit and you're like, oh, this is really good. You can say, like, oh, this is fire, this is straight fire, etc. So I will stop there. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm so sorry that this was so long, much longer than I thought, but I'm so happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Let me remove the presentation. Yeah, that was very interesting. We had a lot of communication at the chat box, if you, I think you noticed. But we also have a couple of questions from people. Let me just see what we have. Okay, this is an interesting question from Kate Daggett. My question is that true that it is in different states there are different slang? So sometimes people don't understand each other. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think not so much in English compared to other languages. I feel like there's like a joke that like, oh yeah, we can't understand like Scottish people because they speak very thickly. But I feel like with slang, there's a lot of there's a lot of terms that are used specifically in Scotland and some other dialects that make it difficult to understand. But that's definitely in more informal language. So I feel like there's some slang that's very much only used in certain places. And so, yes, that can be something that's difficult to understand. But at that point, it's just all about asking that person, oh, what does this mean? I'm just not familiar with this term. Um, and so it just becomes something that, it's something to laugh at more than something that's like an actual barrier to understanding. Because sometimes you can just understand from context clues what it means.
Right. Next question is from Ibrahim Rasulov. What book do you recommend? Do you recommend any books on slang?
I've never read any books on slang. I won't lie about that. In terms of just books to recommend in general, I think a good book to read is *Sapiens* by his last name is Harari. So that's an example.
We have it in the ACT, by the way.
It's a good one.
Good, thank you. Next question from Kate. Are there any rules on how to spell slang words? For example, with capital letters or use other symbols like LOL?
Okay, so in terms of actually spelling them, I feel like it can um it can be a little bit more informal because you're typing quickly and so maybe you type the letters in the wrong order or something like that. Um I think generally like LOL you spell it in that specific way. Um and like you can have the all caps, but that just it gives an idea of like it's more emphasized, you're laughing harder, you're actually laughing out loud maybe. um, and then with the lowercase LOL, it's more of a tone indicator. It's a little bit more like um, a little bit more just showing that it's an amusing thing as opposed to something you're actually laughing at. And so hopefully the presentation, like I think I showed generally how to spell things and how to capitalize things. So hopefully that does help provide some idea of what to capitalize what when. Because sometimes it can be particular, but it's really you should just have fun with it. You should just see what people use in everyday conversation and try to mimic that if you're trying to mimic that, or just you know um, it it varies between people, but it doesn't matter. It's just stylistic after a certain point.
Okay, thank you. Nimatolosa Berjanov is asking, what does blood means?
I don't really know what you're talking about here with this one. I think that this one is difficult. I think it's something I just can't really cover here. You can probably look this up on Urban Dictionary later, and they'll give you a better answer.
Kate is asking, I hear all saying "okie dokie." Is it still in use?
I think it's used a little bit more like ironically. Like I say it sometimes, but it's definitely more of like a playful, like silly way to put okay. I think it's always been that way, but especially nowadays, and it definitely has a connotation of being a little bit older, I guess. But yeah, it's still used, I would say, and it feels very American to me as well.
Question from Ozodbek Kuliyev. How important is slang in speaking exams?
Okay, I would say not very important at all, honestly. I've never taken an English speaking exam, so I actually don't know what you are tested on. Um, so it's really you have to do your research on the exam itself, but everything I covered today, they are slang, and I would say that, like, I would be surprised if I saw some of them covered in a formal English speaking exam because none of them are very formal at all.
Yeah, it would be funny to have your grade lower because you used the wrong emoji.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we don't have any other questions except for the last one. Kate is asking, are there any slang dictionaries?
Oh gosh, I'm sure there's been some person who sat down and they, like, have a fantastic chronicle of, like, what slang was popular when in which countries and which places, etc. I would say for right now, Urban Dictionary is the best you're gonna get. Um, but I'm sure there's books out there. They might be out of date though. That's the case with slang sometimes. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. It was really interesting. I agree with some of the comments here that this is a topic that actually is very much, we get a lot of questions on that.
Mhm.
So it's great to have you speak about it here today. Michelle, we hope to see you again. And thank you so much. I know there is time difference. So, anyways, it's earlier for you, I guess, right? So, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh my, it was absolutely no problem. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye bye.
Bye.